I want to talk with you today about populist rhetoric and populism and how Donald Trump likes to portray himself sort of like as the savior of the working class. And he uses populist rhetoric to try to do this. Now, as I've told people before, the thing about populism is that it's fundamentally a rhetoric. It's not a set of policy ideas. And this makes it so that you can be tricked by populist rhetoric into supporting candidates whose policy ideas are actually horrible and even you might be against if you knew what they were. And I've said before as an example that both Bernie Sanders and Tucker Carlson will often use really similar sounding populist rhetoric, but when it comes to how they would put in place policy, they could not be more different. And likewise with Trump, if you dig beneath the surface just a little bit, his actions and policy ideas tell a very different story. He tries to craft this populist image to win over Republican voters, but his policies and his choices show this pattern of siding with the billionaires and siding with corporations over the everyday workers that he says that he champions. Take, for example, Donald Trump's VP pick, J.D. Vance. Vance is this Silicon Valley venture capitalist with billionaire Peter Thiel's backing. He's publicly opposed to the PRO Act, which is a big labor protection bill. Vance has this short but very telling record in the Senate where he's done really nothing to inspire confidence among union leaders. He's opposed critical labor legislation. He's supported measures that would weaken unions, rejected pro-worker nominees to key federal agencies. And his background, the Yale law degree, the connections to Silicon Valley, it all sort of seems at odds with the supposed working class persona that he's cultivated. And despite the evidence, Trump managed to convince many in 2016 that he was a pro-worker champion, and he's trying to do it again. But if we actually look at the record and we look at the specifics of Project 2025, we very quickly see the reality, which is Trump Vance are not friends to the working class. While Trump claims to represent all of the forgotten men and women, the labor section of Project 2025 is really focused on boosting corporate profits, weakening unions, rather than improving wages or working conditions. And the plan is overtly hostile to unions. It even suggests the potential dissolution of public sector unions, including those for police, firefighters, and teachers. We heard during Trump's conversation with Elon Musk on Spaces just how hostile Trump is to workers. Stuart Applebaum, who's president of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, pointed out that Project 2025 is all about rolling back workers' rights, including measures like making it easier for 16 and 17-year-olds to work in hazardous jobs, changing rules so that workers qualify for overtime only when they've worked 80 hours in 2 weeks rather than 40 hours in any 1 week, classifying gig workers as independent contractors, stripping them of minimum wage and overtime protections. And this plan also would weaken unions by making it easier for workers to decertify unions at any time, rather than just during the period before contracts expire, by banning project labor agreements that favor unionized contractors, rescinding the persuader rule, which requires employers to disclose if they hire anti-union consultants. And so one of the overarching themes here in Project 2025 and in Trump's view on labor is the desire to reduce the power of the federal administrative state. That's how they talk about it. It's very Steve Bannon language. But the section on labor would actually increase the Department of Labor's power when it comes to overseeing unions, which are often at odds with what the Heritage Foundation's corporate supporters would want. It's another one of these, here's my principle, except when it's inconvenient. And Project 2025 has no proposals that would strengthen worker voices or make it easier to unionize. For example, it doesn't support allowing the National Labor Relations Board to fine a company if it violates labor law. This is like a basic key provision of accountability and of the PRO Act, supported by Democrats, but opposed by Republicans. And instead, if you look at Project 2025 section on labor, it opens with a religious statement talking about giving workers the support they need for rewarding, well-paying, and self-driven careers. and restoring the family supporting job as the centerpiece of the economy. And it even talks about the Judeo-Christian tradition stretching back to Genesis as recognizing fruitful work as integral to dignity and service to God. This is bonkers stuff. The entire chapter on labor only includes a single recommendation to raise workers' pay, suggesting on the Sabbath, there should be overtime pay on a religious basis. The chapter then pivots to culture war issues, targeting diversity, DEI, etc. Project 2025 doesn't mention increasing the federal minimum wage. It's been stuck at $7.25 for 15 years, doesn't support paid family and medical leave. And despite claims of supporting family-friendly policies, the plan does nothing to help workers balance work and family life. So Trump's pro-labor rhetoric is completely hollow. However, one policy Trump keeps promoting is no tax on tips, which sounds pro-worker, but it's quite misleading and it does little to help the majority of workers. So we should dig into that. One of the most popular policies that Trump has proposed so far in his campaign is eliminating federal taxes on tips in an attempt to appeal to working class voters, waiters, bartenders, hairdressers. And this proposal is so popular that even Kamala Harris has embraced it, with many on the right now accusing Kamala Harris of stealing Trump's policy. Many tipped workers already pay little or no federal income tax. For instance, half of all servers earn $32,000 or less, so they would see very little benefit from Trump's plan to begin with. That's the first thing to understand. The federal tipped minimum wage has been stuck at $2.13 an hour since 1991, leaving these workers guaranteed only $7.25 an hour with tips, which is very far from a minimum wage from a living wage in 2024. Most servers, except the top 10% who make over $60,000 a year, would see minimal benefit from no tax on tips. It also doesn't help other restaurant workers, the hosts, the cooks, the dishwashers, who earn an hourly wage but often don't get tips. The National Restaurant Association and other groups like the policy because it could undermine efforts to raise the minimum wage, which is really what they're against. And by getting rid of taxes on tips, they hope to reduce support for higher minimum wage initiatives. Labor groups like Restaurant Workers United and One Fair Wage criticize the policy as a fake solution, which doesn't really address the issue of low-wage workers. Unlike Trump, Kamala Harris has also committed to raising the minimum wage for hourly workers. She hasn't said by how much. But there's skepticism because of President Biden's previous unfulfilled promises on minimum wage increases, blaming his failure to do so on the Senate parliamentarian. But bottom line, if implemented alongside a minimum wage increases, no tax on tips could be a modest boost to service workers, but it really can't be seen as a replacement for a more impactful minimum wage increase. And so there's concern that both Trump and Harris could use the no tax on tips proposal to placate workers instead of actually pushing for wage increases. So this is one reason why Kamala Harris should offer a meaningful alternative to Trump's fake populism rather than just adopting his policies. And we should talk about how that could be done. Despite Trump's pro-corporate track record, he is shockingly still seen by some as a working class hero. He spent his entire life trying to remain isolated from the very folks he now claims to respect and want to support. But we put that aside for a moment. Kamala Harris needs to break through this narrative with a genuine alternative that really benefits workers, not just a repackaging of Trump's promises. Now, her choice as Tim Walz as running mate is a really great move in this direction because Walz is known for his no-nonsense approach. He has a track record of progressive victories, really could be a game changer. And he also offers a sort of populist rhetoric, but we look at his work as governor of Minnesota and we see that his populist rhetoric is backed by actual achievements. In 2022, Walz achieved a legislative trifecta with a 34-33 Senate majority and a 6-vote edge in the House. That's a slimmer Democratic majority than Biden had at the beginning of his term. And he managed to pass one of the most progressive agendas in the country. So even with slim margins, change is possible. And under Walz's leadership, Minnesota passed some groundbreaking legislation on child poverty. They passed a sizable child tax credit expected to cut child poverty by about a third. Universal school meals, free breakfast and lunch for all public school kids. On higher education, the North Star Promise, which guarantees free public college tuition for students from families that earn under $80,000 a year, boosting K through 12 spending by over $2 billion, making sure school employees can get unemployment during summer break. And then as far as real labor victories, $15 minimum wage, 12 weeks paid family and medical leave, regulations to improve conditions in Amazon warehouses and meatpacking plants. And Tim Walz also signed SF 3035, which is arguably the most significant worker protection legislation in Minnesota's history, mandating paid sick days, banning non-compete clauses, protecting workers from anti-union meetings and other provisions, and doing so much more for vulnerable workers. So it's the Tim Walz labor-friendly approach that has earned him the backing of 26 Minnesota labor leaders, urging Harris, pick him. UAW President Shawn Fain said Walz is one of the union's top choices for VP. Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers, said Walz is a laboratory for opportunity, saying that the things he's doing are analogous to what Franklin Roosevelt did under his New York governorship. So Walz's selection solidifies, hopefully, support among working class voters, especially in key battleground states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. He's connecting with blue-collar voters, as we can see during rallies and at campaign events. And it's really a blueprint at the end of the day for how you can have a genuine alternative to the empty populist rhetoric of people like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Now, if you look at what red state governors are focusing on, it's culture wars, it's cracking down on woke books, drag queen story hour, reproductive freedom, lab-grown meat, some Republican governors are going after. And meanwhile, Tim Walz delivers tangible benefits to working families. So the Harris-Walz ticket has a real opportunity here. They have to highlight the successes. They have to lay out the vision for a pro-worker agenda. It is accurate to say that Joe Biden is the most pro-union president we've arguably ever had. Harris-Walz, if what Walz did in Minnesota serves as a blueprint, could be even more pro-union and pro-labor, because at the end of the day, a relatively small percentage of American workers are in unions, but most Americans have a job. One of the most pro-labor administrations is absolutely possible. Focus on the real economic improvements, meaningful things that you're doing for workers. And meanwhile, we have to expose Trump's hollow populism. We have to expose J.D. Vance's completely bogus recreation of his life story as a champion for the working class when he is far from it, and actually select an administration that would really be for the working class. So there's an opportunity. Step one, understand the empty rhetoric of Trump. Step two, understand what the ideal would be. And step three, evaluate Tim Walz's record to say, oh, here's how he compares in Minnesota to what we would like to see at the federal level, and then vote based on that. To me, the right vote is very clear.